I would like to begin by playing my theme song. A rabbi, a prophet, and a king walked into a bar. Sounds like the beginning of a joke, and indeed there is a punchline, but to understand the punchline, you have to know these three stories. Reb Zusha was very ill. He lay in bed, pale, eyes swollen, red, sleeping. His students gathered around, reciting psalms, praying for his recovery. One of the students saw Reb Zusha open his eyes and look around. The student asked, Reb Zusha, how do you feel? In labored words, Reb Zusha replied, I feel as though a heavy stone is laying on my chest. And with the exertion of that one sentence, he fell back asleep. He slept for an hour, and then he woke up. He looked a little better. He edged himself up onto his elbows and raised his head. One of the students asked, Reb Zusha, how do you feel? He said, I had a dream. In the dream, I had already died, and I was waiting at the gates of heaven. And there was a long line of people ahead of me. And I saw that as each person arrived at the gates of heaven, the interviewing angel asked a question. And I thought, what is the interviewing angel going to ask me? Reb Zusha, why didn't you rise to the potential of Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses, our teacher, the giver of the law? Reb Zusha, why didn't you rise to the level of Rabbi Akiva, the great scholar? Why didn't you rise to the potential of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement? I stood there online, he said, trembling, thinking about what question the angel was going to ask me and rehearsing my answers. When finally my turn came and I arrived at the gates of heaven, the interviewing angel asked, Reb Zusha, why didn't you rise to the potential of Reb Zusha? The students stood silently, looking into their own hearts, wondering about their own undiscovered potential. Again, one of the students asked, Reb Zusha, how do you feel? He said, I feel as though that heavy stone has been lifted from my chest and placed on my shoulders. Zeh hayom asa Hashem, nagila v'nismechavo, kol hanshama tahaleliyah, hallelujah, hallelujah. There was an old man walking down the road. He'd been walking all day. And as the day was coming to a close, he saw a house off to the side. Beautiful two-story home with a beautiful garden in the front. Roses and trees and a path that meandered its way to the front door. He took that path, grasped the handrail, and took the 3 steps, beautiful marble steps, and knocked on the front door. No answer. Knocked again. And a man and a woman came to the door and opened it up just a short distance. And they peered out at him. And he said, I've been walking on the road all day long, and as the day is coming to a close, I'm wondering if there's a place where I could spend the night and perhaps something you could give me to eat. Well, the woman disappeared and came back with a piece of bread and handed it to him. And the man said, we have a shed behind the house. You can sleep there, and there should be an old rug in there you can use for a blanket. So the man took the bread, went behind the house, and that's where he spent the night. The following morning, he came to the front door again, knocked, and the man and the woman again opened the door a crack and peered out. They looked him up and down, hardly remembering who he was. All they saw was this old man with tattered clothing, dusty from the road. Oh, yes, you were the man who stayed in our shed, yeah. And the man said, I want to thank you. And I wish that whatever you do next, you continue to do forever. Well, the man and the woman didn't know what to make of this weird statement. They just closed the door. And the man walked back through the garden, back to the road, and continued on his journey. He walked all day long, and as the day was coming to a close, he saw a house off to the side. Just a shack, really, just one story. He saw there was cardboard covering one of the windows and just a dirt path. Well, he walked right up to the front door and knocked. And a man and a woman came to the door and said, what can we do for you? He said, well, I've been walking on the road all day, and as the day is coming to a close, I wonder if there's a place where I could stay and perhaps you could give me something to eat. And they said, come on in. Welcome. He saw on the kitchen table there were 2 bowls of soup. They'd been poured but not yet tasted. And the man took a ladle and ladled some soup from each of those 2 bowls into a 3rd bowl, so they each had an equal amount. And the woman broke their bread up into 3 pieces, and they sat there having their soup and bread. And the man asked the couple about their lives in the village, and they asked him about his journey, and then it was time to go to sleep. They brought a mattress into their little kitchen and put on clean sheets and gave him towels so he could wash up, and they all went to sleep. The following morning, the man said, thank you very much. Whatever you do next, I wish you may continue to do forever with God's blessing. Well, the man and the woman thought this was a rather odd statement, but they nodded respectfully and watched him as he walked back out to the road and waved as he went on his way. Well, the first thing they did was pick up the sheets and the towels, and they washed them and dried them and put them away because they had so little they had to take care of whatever they had. And they went back to the kitchen to get the mattress, and they saw there were still sheets and there were still towels. So they gathered up the sheets and towels and they washed them and dried them and put them away. And they went back to the kitchen for the mattress, and there were still sheets and towels there. And they realized this was no ordinary man. They had been visited by the prophet Elijah. The prophet Elijah, who never died but went to heaven and occasionally returns to earth seeking justice and mercy. And they realized whenever they needed some money, they could sell sheets and towels, and they would never again be so awfully poor. Well, as for the first household, When Elijah left, he said the same thing. Whatever you do next, may you continue to do forever. But he didn't say, with God's blessing. And after he left, the man and the woman found they each had to go to the bathroom. And so they each went to their private bathrooms, and to this day, they are still sitting there peeing. Zeh hayom asa Hashem, nagila v'nismecha bo, kol hanshama tehalel. Hallelujah, hallelujah. King Solomon was distressed. He sat on his throne with his head in his hands, softly moaning to himself. Benyahu, the chief of his army, his chief of staff, his trusted advisor, Benyahu saw him and said, "My king, what troubles you? What can I do to help?" Well, King Solomon was not inclined to share his inner feelings with others, but this was Benyahu. Benyahu, if it hadn't been for Benyahu, he would never have gained the throne. If there was anybody he could trust, it was Benyahu. And so he told him, "When I make a good decision, I feel great, but I am overcome with doubt. I fear that in my confidence, when another decision has to be made, I will make a poor decision." And I get depressed. And indeed, when I do make a poor decision, I feel a failure, and I can't make any decision at all. And I don't know what to do. Well, Benyahu didn't really have any advice for him, but he said, "I will journey through the kingdom, and I will ask the people for their wisdom. And in that wisdom, we will find a solution." And so he confidently began this journey. Months went by, a year, and he had collected an enormous amount of wisdom which he had written into a book. And he reviewed that wisdom, looking for the help that his king needed. But there was nothing there. There was nothing that really would help King Solomon. And so he headed back to the palace, trudging along, shoulders slouched. And as he's heading back to the palace, he hears the whispered wisdom of the wind. "This too shall pass. This too shall pass." And he realized, yeah, I feel pretty bad now, but in time, this will pass. And it struck him, this is just the wisdom that King Solomon needs in those times when he becomes depressed. This too shall pass. And so he hastened his stride and threw his shoulders back, his head high, aiming right for the palace and the king's throne. And again, he heard the whispered wisdom of the wind. This too shall pass. This too shall pass. And he realized, yes, I feel great right now, but in time, that feeling will fade. And so he continued on into the palace with more measured strides and presented King Solomon with that wisdom. And King Solomon felt that it was so valuable. He had it engraved on a ring which he wore on his hand for all of his days. Gam ze ya'avur. This too shall pass. So now, with apologies to anyone who has had a kidney stone. A rabbi, a prophet, and a king walk into a bar. The rabbi says, I have a stone. The prophet says, I have to pee. The king says, this too shall pass. All you have to do is remember a rabbi, a prophet, and a king, and you too can tell these stories.